And if you've been checking the mail lately, I'm sure you've got that, they call it junk mail. You've got a pile of coupons for air-conditioned service on your car. And this is the time of year where you're thinking, hey, maybe I do need an air-conditioned service on my car. So when, Matt, does someone need an air-conditioned service? Do they just sitting around and go, it seems to work good, blows cold. Car looks good, I look good.
Service on your car. So, things deplete very slowly. You may think that the car is blowing just cold and fine because you bought the car brand new. It was ice cold, but a degree here, another degree. You may not know that it's not working optimum, but I think in most cases you want to have a symptom. I don't think if you have a 3 or 4 year old car, you need to go and say, hey, I got your coupon for an AC inspection. Go ahead and service my air conditioner. And again, what's an air conditioning service? There's no law. There's nothing that defines.
Right. It's not set up. The term is not set up by the federal government. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing, but at the
right
same
now.
time, so you don't need. So it's going to be, in most cases, it's going to be symptom driven. But we've said this before. Now's a good time of year. Trade cars with your spouse for a couple days. I jump in my wife's car and I hear this noise that drives me nuts. Oh, it's done that forever. Needs to be fixed. Or she might jump in my car and go, gosh, your air conditioning's not as good as mine. Well, if you do that and you have that conversation, that might be the trigger to maybe we should, maybe we should have it checked. But again, it goes back, do you have a symptom? So, and most people are going to say the classic symptom, and especially this time of year, and it's a classic example of a car being low on charge. You leave for work at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Nice and cool.
It's nice and cool, but you come out of your office, whether you're parked in a garage or parked in the shade or in the sun. It's going to be worse in the sun, but it takes 10 minutes or 5 minutes to cool off. That's a sign that you need a service because you're low on charge.
One of the things that so low, you said low on charge. So when you go into the auto shop and you do, let's say it's just not blowing as cool as you'd like it to. The other problem is maybe air conditioning's not blowing at all. You don't feel any airflow coming out of your dash. That's kind of a different, symptom or problem than an air conditioned service. Those are really two different things because the air conditioned service, if you're referring to checking the refrigerant level and are we making, the coil nice and cold, that's one thing. The other thing is how well is the air blowing. And Matt, you were talking about when you go to the service counter, really knowing your symptom when you go in there. Is it blowing hot? Is it blowing just ambient air, the temperature around you? Or is it blowing cool but not cold? Or is it not blowing at all? All those things matter when we go do an AC service.
Well, and I think we should remind everybody, and I think a lot of shops out there who listen will thank us for this. Air conditioning service and repair, you can have a multitude of symptoms and the same result, or a multitude of problems that result in the same symptom, in the same generic term of my air conditioning doesn't work or it doesn't cool. And it's oftentimes a two-step process. Sometimes we have to charge the air conditioning system. If it's low on a charge, we need to determine if it's low by evacuating the refrigerant that's in there, measuring it against what's supposed to be in there, trying to identify and repair any leaks. But sometimes we have cars with multiple symptoms. You might bring your car in and say, oh, it just doesn't blow very cold all the time. And it was low on charge and we send you out. And then you come back the next day mad. It's doing the same thing. Well, now maybe the blower doesn't work today, but the blower that moves the air was working fine yesterday. So it can't, or maybe you have a leak that wasn't evident. I tell people you could come back here in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but we've got some dye in there. We can find this to help us find the leak if we can't pinpoint it today.
And then the other thing is, where's the air coming out of? Is it blowing out of the dashboard, like into your face? Is it blowing up by the windshield from the defroster? Is it coming out down on the floor? So that's another thing that comes into play. So when we're at the service counter and you're bringing your car in, we may ask you a series of questions and you don't have to say, well, you're the mechanic. Can't you figure it out? Well, I'm sure we can, but it'll cost you less just to give us good information.
Well, and you say, and David, even you and I went back and forth on this little comment in the studio. Well, it blows hot. Okay. Well, if it's hot outside, does that? Yeah, of course it blows hot if it's hot, but is it blowing heated air? That's a difference between, hot air. Well, if it's hot out, of course it's just blowing hot.
110 degrees.
Or someone's just using that generic term. The opposite of cold is hot. So if it's not blowing cold, therefore it must be hot. But hot, heated air you may not have an air conditioning problem. You may have a or you do have a control problem where it's blowing the heated air from the heater, so you might have a blend door issue. Dodge trucks have that problem. You know, the stuff breaks. The air conditioning itself, the mechanical function of pumping the refrigerant,
Making cold coil.
cooling the coil so that you can have heat transfer to the cold, and when the air blows across it, that's a whole different. That's just one element of the system. So what? Go ahead.
I was going to say this happens because you made the comment. Today we'll keep it simple at this moment. Talk about the refrigerant part of the deal. Hey, it's not blowing cold, but it's blowing cool, or it's just blowing ambient air. I'm not getting cold air out of it. So we have a charge issue. So someone will go in a shop, they'll get an AC service that we're talking about. They'll put gauges on it. Maybe they'll evacuate it, recharge it. They'll add a dye to it. And a week later, they're at my shop. They say, well, I had them service it. Now it's blowing warm. I don't trust those people, so I'm not going back. Well, actually, AC service can and oftentimes is a two-step process. It could be low just by the natural progress that we lose an ounce or two every year, or it could be low because it sprung a leak. You don't always spot the leaks. We can check the obvious places. Oh, yeah, this hose connection is going to leak, or here, and we like a little sniffer. We got some dye we can check it with. But some leaks we can't see until give it a week and say, hey.
Or sometimes you have the obvious leak. You've got the catastrophic failure. This thing is, or a pattern failure in a car. You open the hood. There's all this oil around the air conditioning hose. Because remember, there's oil in the system. That's critical, and you can see that. You can't see. The other thing is your air conditioning leak. You don't see it. That's an invisible gas. It's just going away. Now, sometimes you get some green dye in there in the oil, and depending on the location, and
I'll be able to see it.
and all the planets
But it's
are-
like massive head wound. You go into the hospital, and they're going to deal with that. They may not catch the cut on your elbow because they're dealing with triage. We got a big problem over here. And so I've seen what you're talking about when they come in and the manifold hose assembly is leaking. You're like, whoop, got the leak, fix it up, suck it down, juice it up, and a week later it's blowing warm again because you couldn't see the evaporative coil in the center of the dashboard that no one can see was leaking. So you took care of the obvious. Well, you didn't get my car right. No, again, it's one of those things. We got to.
I think the biggest problem there is communication, so that alignment of expectations, really making sure, everybody knows what's going on here. So it's really important for the owner of the car to give good information. It's very important for the service advisors and the mechanics to communicate about what they find, and let them know that when we're telling and describing what we need to repair, and then also on the pickup is, hey, here's what we've done. But here's what potentially could happen. You need to make sure to call us.
Last summer I saw several come in for AC service because they were disappointed in the performance of the air condition. And the first thing we did was simply change the cabin filter. And then the airflow comes back, and the airflow cools you because there's evaporation off your skin. That's the second part of it. The first part of it is the cold that we make with the AC compressor. So they show up, we change out the cabin filter, and everything works great. The other thing that comes up in the summertime is your electrical system, okay? Because in the summertime, that AC is cranking. If you got like one of these SUVs, you got the front air going, you got the back air going, you got the blowers in the seats going. You're pulling all kinds of juice out of this car. Your alternator's working double time, and this is the time of year where you got to have a good battery.
Need to have reserves, and not to mention on the air conditioner, you've got the electronic magnet holding that clutch. Engaging the clutch on the engine, and that takes amperage.
Right.
and if you don't have some amperage stored in your battery, and you don't have a good battery with good reserves, you will have a problem.
Every car that comes into my shop, we're usually testing something or just servicing, maintenance, oil change. The first thing we're going to do is check that battery. Nothing wrecks things on a car more than having a wimpy battery and your alternator's doing double time work because the battery's wimpy and all these other things going on. So we come back, we're taking your phone calls at 602-277-5827.